and good evening, everybody. I'm Andrea Miller, and I'm the founding board member for Center for Common Ground. I want to welcome you all tonight to our Southern Voices series. I am going to share my screen right now. I've got some announcements, and let's get the silliness off the screen, and we are ready to go. So tonight we are going to have a very, very, very special guest, Mr. Daniel Blackman, and I have to admit, tiny little bit of a fangirl over here. So I will work really hard to remain professional, but we'll still have fun. And so we've got a very simple agenda tonight. Um, we've got a very interesting campaign update. We were approached by folks from Louisiana after we did our second Southern Voices on COVID, and they were very interested in looking at a democracy center. We were also approached at almost the same time by people we've partnered with before in Louisiana, the state table called the Power Coalition, and they were looking for people to make phone calls to community of color voters in Louisiana, telling them where and how they can arrange to get their COVID shots. So Gabe is working with the Power Coalition to build our Louisiana tab, and then our new potential folks on the ground are going to be recruiting their own phone banking team on the ground to help with this new COVID release project. So this is very, very exciting for us because even though we don't have a democracy center in Louisiana, we have a wonderful project that gives us the ability to see, will we be able to get together the right people in the coalition? And it looks like we will. And we are already presenting solutions that the community needs on the ground. So we are very, very, very excited about that. Now, we're also going to be doing a very, very, very brief legislative update, and then we will get to our very special guest. So, legislative update. You will very soon be getting an email from me that is asking people to write their senators and ask them to vote for President Biden's suggestions for the U.S. Postal Service Board of Governors. So again, the Board of Governors was never full. So there is an opportunity to appoint more governors or for the Senate to approve more governor selections. And then, of course, our hope with a full board of governors is that we get rid of the joy and we get another labor person or someone who is dedicated to ensuring that we move the post office forward. You will also, probably not this week, maybe next week, S40 and HR 40, Congress currently has the bill for studying a reparations committee. So they will not be advancing any money to people for reparations. This bill right now says we believe that African Americans are owed an apology, and we want to establish a commission to study what can and should be done. Justin, do you want to unmute and give us the update on Arizona since you attended that meeting?
Sure. So something very exciting and unexpected happened today in Arizona with their voter suppression bill 1485. So we are expecting this bill to likely pass through the Senate and make its way to the governor today. But a certain senator, State Senator Townsend, voted against that bill, and it died today in the state Senate, which is very exciting. Now, there's a lot of caveats with this. There's a motion to reconsider, so at any point, if Townsend decides to change her mind, then a vote for this bill can immediately be called back, and it will pass on to the governor. So this bill is not dead yet, and it won't be dead until the end of session, which may be extended further on than this week, and it was supposed to end this week. So lots of things going on, lots of craziness and chaos happening, but we're watching closely, and this is a big win.
And thank you, Justin. For those of you who may not know, SB 1485 is primarily designed to kick about 200,000 people off of the permanent early voting list in Arizona, otherwise known as Pebble. And as most people know, Arizona, like Florida, is one of our quote retiree states. And there are 2.3 million out of the 5 million voting age populations of Arizona who are over the age of 60. So that permanent early voting list is really useful and very, very helpful to the residents of Arizona. What they are saying is anyone who has not voted in the last two federal elections, and that ends up being about 200,000 people on the permanent early voting list, will be kicked off the permanent early voting list. And then we also currently have been working in the great state of Texas, where they are not about to be outdone by some of the other southern states or western states. They're like, we're south and we're west, so we know how to suppress the vote as well. So we've been fighting SB 7 and HB 6, and then two of the newer bills that we are looking at is HB 1020. The main thing about HB 1020 is it is looking at removing the position of volunteer deputy registrar, which is kind of what we have here in Virginia. And then it is also looking at ending the voter registration program that the deputy registrars normally run in high schools. And then we have their new bill, HB 330. And I've been staring at way too much legislation. I'm going, I can't even remember what new bad stuff HB 330 does. When you look at what are all the bad bills in 47 states, they tend to run together, and HB 330 is one of my new ones. But again, we put it on the voter suppression list, and this bill is coming around and it is just starting to move. And next, our very special guest, Daniel Blackman. So we know Daniel Blackman, those of us who did work in Georgia, we know that he was the candidate for the Georgia Public Service Commission. We know that he got enough votes that that particular race, along with the two Senate seats, were forced into a runoff. We had billboards all over Georgia, and our billboards we're reminding people there's a runoff election and you are going to be electing your 2 senators and your Georgia Public Service Commissioner. So rather than me sitting here and reading his bio, which is totally great and cool, let's take the time to meet Daniel Blackman and talk to the gentleman himself. So, Daniel, welcome.
Hey, how's everybody doing?
I'm going to
Just
say
wave
they're
at me, wave
all,
at me.
yeah,
It-
there you go, guys. And they're like, we can't say anything. She muted us.
Well, it's an absolute honor to be celebrating Earth Day 2021, given a year full of a pandemic and all the challenges and the loss and the suffering we've had. What an opportunity to be here tonight with you, Andrea, and with so many friends to really discuss, environmental justice and, how we secure our planet, what has been talked about. And I want to take this opportunity for all of you all that are watching this, all of you that are participating today, all of you on this call, the work that we were able to accomplish in Georgia, sending 2 United States senators to Washington, D.C., could not have been done without outside support. It could not have been done without those billboards. And so we thank you immensely. I regularly am in touch with both Reverend Warnock and Reverend and John Ossoff, and they have always been committed beyond their campaigns to the work. And I'm sure that they're doing their own part, but they are fully in support of mitigating the climate crisis and fighting for environmental justice. So I'm looking forward to having fun. I don't want this to be just a conversation about climate change and doom and gloom. I want to have a good time, and I want to celebrate the opportunities, but also address the environmental challenges that we all face. So thank you for having me.
And Daniel, thank you so very much. Number one, Daniel, what possessed you to run for Public Service Commissioner in Georgia?
Is that the first
Do?
question I'm gonna get? I mean, that's just you throwing me a curveball. I mean, look, my family's from Barbados. My grandfather was a diplomat to the United Nations, and I'm very proud of my father's service in the United States military. So I come from a family of service. But what really moved me to be in the climate space was in 2005, 4 days after Hurricane Katrina. I was in New Orleans, Louisiana, to help families that had been displaced by the extreme weather of Hurricane Katrina. We helped get 3 families out of New Orleans, and we helped to relocate them to Atlanta. But the devastation that I saw over 15 years ago, it hit here and it hit here. My heart ached because I saw so many people from the Black and brown communities that were in the lower Ninth Ward, and so many folks that were from poor white communities that were just literally displaced. And I didn't understand why. At the time, I think, 24, 25 years old. And I just really wanted to be a part of the solution, but no one had ever spoken to me about global warming or climate change. That following year, I had a chance to meet Al Gore and a wonderful, amazing woman by the name of Laura Turner Seidel, who's the daughter of Ted Turner. And she, basically said to me, Daniel, we don't have enough voices of color in this movement. And so from 2006 all the way up to 2014, I worked to learn what I was never taught in grade school, what I was never taught in college. But I was very fortunate to have something, Andrea, that I think you would appreciate. And that was the fact that Reverend C.T. Vivian, Reverend Joseph Lowry, Reverend Gerald Durley, and John Lewis were my mentors. So I had an amazing support system of civil rights leaders that taught me the importance of organizing, mobilizing, educating. And it just so happened that I took what I learned from the civil rights leaders that helped to groom me and prepare me for this moment. I took what they taught me and I translated that into how do we take the tactics and the activism that was used in the 50s and the 60s, and how do we apply it to today, right? There's a quote that says, we do not inherit the planet from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. So as I began to have children, it made me more motivated to want to get involved and want to be a part of this fight. And it just so happened that that fight was at the Public Service Commission. The first time I ran, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was running a statewide campaign at 28 years old, and I'm sorry, at 36 years old, I was running a statewide campaign, and folks told us we wouldn't get 1 million votes. We got 1.2 million votes, but I lost. And then in 2020, I decided to run again, not just because Trump was on the ballot, but the Trump administration had cut 122 environmental regulations. They had completely dismantled a lot of the progress we made under the Obama administration. I had a chance to go to the Vatican in 2015, ahead of the Paris Climate Accords, to witness the Pope give his encyclical on climate change. And I understood fundamentally the importance of running for office, not because you want it on your resume, but because you feel you can contribute something to have a greater impact on the community in which you serve. And as a result, we got more votes than any Democrat in the history of the state of Georgia, and made it into a runoff, as you stated, and came up short in the runoff. But I'm very privileged and proud to have run and have the environment at the top of the ticket in 2020. Folks in Georgia understand climate change. They understand the Public Service Commission. They understand the coal ash challenges and environmental racism, not just because I ran, but because so many young folks and so many organizers came together and made it a point that environmental justice was going to be on the ballot. And we made sure that we left our mark. And for elections in the future, no matter how far down the ballot they are, we're going to fight and we're going to continue to organize. And I'm very privileged to be here tonight. So thank you for allowing me to share this space with you.
And Daniel, I am loving that, because so many of our people are from California. Can I get a quick definition of environmental justice / environmental racism, in case people just haven't in their world experience come across those terms?
There's equity and there's equality. What I would say to folks is that when you think of environmental justice issues, I want you to think of this in a very simple example. A person's health should never be contingent on their zip code. A person's quality of life or life expectancy should never be based on the color of their skin. And too often we see communities, particularly in the Black community, where 68% of coal-fired plants or fossil fuel facilities or waste facilities are in proximity, within a 30-mile proximity to communities of color. 68% of the Black community. I want you to understand that. Black children get asthma 6 or 7 times the national average, not because they're any worse than white kids or any other race, but because most of the cities where there are high populations of Black and brown folks, the policies that are in place are not structured to protect those communities. So when I think of environmental justice, I think of standing up for folks and making equity, inclusion, and quite frankly, equality top tier issues that can help us make the right decisions. Because if we're making decisions now based on the north side of the town versus the south side, and there are 2 different paradigms, then what we're saying is that one community matters and the other doesn't.
And I love that definition. One of the things that I sometimes use when people talk to me about, hopefully you and I aren't going to get into a fight, things like carbon pricing, cap or whatever it is, my response is, if you don't want these dirty, polluting fossil fuel projects in your backyard, how dare you be willing to put them in someone else's backyard? And I think that is why your run and you're elevating these concepts to regular people, taking it out of that weird policy space where it lives, so that people could go, oh, I never thought about it that way. And I think we still have so much work to do in that space.
Thank
Now, in Georgia, like so many other southern states, because Georgia, like the South, is predominantly rural, you have these marvelous creations, rural electric cooperatives. So the Public Service Commission, do they have regulatory oversight over the RECs?
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
the thing that people have to understand is to understand Georgia, you have to understand what we commonly refer to as the fourth arm of government, which is Georgia Power. So when you look at Southern Company, that includes Mississippi Power, Florida Power, Alabama Power, Georgia Power. In Georgia, there is no, whether you have an EMC like myself, which is an electric membership corporation, or you have a MEAG, or you are just a ratepayer. There is no utility situation in this state that does not have a direct impact based on what Georgia Power does, right? So I think the hardest thing about explaining this to you was the challenges I faced throughout the state of Georgia when folks said, well, I don't have Georgia Power. But then when I would bring up Plant Vogtle, which is a nuclear expansion that's over 6 years behind schedule and over $30 billion of a ticket right now, 14.5 billion of which is over budget, right? From what they initially told us it would cost. And it's a project that's going to take 60 years for ratepayers to pay off. Well, what I try to get people to understand is it doesn't matter what corner of the state you're in. 10.2 million people in the state of Georgia, 1.9 million of which live at or below poverty. So there's no way that the public service commissioners, 5 commissioners, many states like California call it a public utility commission. In Georgia, it's a public service commission, but there's no county of the 159 counties in the state of Georgia, there's no county that does not have some direct or indirect impact from the decisions made at the Public Service Commission and by our utility companies in the state.
Yes, thank you for that. And one of the things, well, again, I'm going to ask you a very Georgia specific question. I know in Virginia, most of our coal-fired plants are owned by the rural electric cooperatives. The investor-owned utilities have kind of pushed themselves away from that. They've gone nuclear, not like that's been a big success either. So what's our circumstance in Georgia? Is that similar? Who owns the
you
dirty
broke up on the
energy?
last part. What was the latter part of your question?
The latter part of my question is, who owns the dirty energy?
Well, it's Georgia Power. I mean, like you got to understand, one of our major problems in Georgia is coal ash and coal ash ponds, right? So we have 90 million tons of coal ash in the state of Georgia. I mean, when you understand how that has an impact, right, with coal fire plants. I mean, Plant Sheriff, for example, that was right, near Macon, Georgia, at one point emitted more coal ash than the entire state of Maine combined, right? So when you understand the overt impact of dirty, energy in our state, unfortunately, until many utility companies transition to a space where we're using clean technology and cleaner energy, we're going to continuously be faced with this. And it goes back to your previous question about environmental racism. It's not going to be stored in communities that are affluent or predominantly white. Usually it's in poor rural areas where the populations are either heavily on Black and brown communities or heavily on low and moderate income families. And those types of things pose a great challenge. And I'll say it like this: either we pay for it now or we pay for it later, but it's going to cost us. Either we go ahead and pay to take care of the problem and make a just and an efficient transition, or we continue to put profits ahead of the health, the well-being, and the safety of the community, and we end up paying for it in the next generation. And we should not leave our children with a worse environment than the one that we inherited.
Wonderful. Thank you very, very much. And when you were talking about that, again, that made me think, as a public service commissioner, what did you see was your opportunity to begin to change that? I mean, it didn't get broken in a day, so it's not going to get fixed in a day.
But the thing about it is that I think was such a motivating factor for me, and I want all of your listeners to hear what I'm about to tell you, because I think it's probably one of the biggest and most missing elements within our country at this time. You don't always have to go into a space because you're going to be the catalyst that's going to take it from where it is to where it's supposed to be. Sometimes our role is to be in the position to be a bridge. I saw my candidacy in two perspectives, right? Because number one, there hadn't been a Democrat elected in Georgia in almost 20 years to a statewide constitutional office, and number two, there had never been a black man or black person at all elected to the Public Service Commission in the state of Georgia. So I saw this as an opportunity to do two things. Number one, to educate folks. The average person, when they get their light bill, they just pay it. I mean, we had a gentleman during the pandemic that was a diabetic. His power got cut off because he couldn't afford to pay his bill. And once his power was off, he couldn't refrigerate his insulin because it just wouldn't be able to happen. He didn't know who to go to. Do I go to my city council? Do I go to my school board? Do I go to my mayor? Do I go to my, my local congressional representative? What I wanted to do was I wanted to use this opportunity to educate, because look, I'd have been outvoted 4-1 every time. There are 5 commissioners. You need 3 votes to get anything done. I would have used that platform to educate and to build infrastructure, which leads me to the second point, which is why I ran. I wanted to build an apparatus, right, that can take us into the future. And the apparatus that I wanted to build was to basically activate our technical college campuses and our community college campuses, along with our historically Black colleges. I wanted to create a network that would have ongoing stakeholder awareness, so that regardless of if we were in a pandemic, regardless of a hurricane, a tornado, an extreme weather event, we had a space for science, research, development, and a pipeline for a workforce of the future. So I was doing it more to build infrastructure over a long period of time until we were able to elect 1 or 2 other Democrats that can help us to begin to shift and change the policies of the Public Service Commission.
And again, I love that answer, because everything starts with a plan and building that infrastructure, that bedrock where you can keep adding on to it, adding on to it. And as you said, we have to have an educated public. So if the populace doesn't understand, well, I know I have a problem, but I don't know why, it is impossible to mobilize them and point them in. You need to go and complain and advocate right here. This is where we start pushing. And I thank you so very much for doing that. All those great civil rights leaders that you mentioned, one of their strongest suits was educating regular people, telling them honestly what was what.
I agree.
And all right, now in order to fix, oh, go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was just going to agree with you. I remember John Lewis shared a story with me at one point about how the Montgomery bus boycott was started by 11 people. A bus system was shut down for, a year and 16 days, right? Because folks got together and they had a plan. And so even when I look at this call, I want everyone to know that we all are a piece of a larger puzzle. And if 11 people can literally shut down a system, change constitutional law as it relates to racism in public transit, and literally be the catalyst for Dr. King entering into the movement, what can we do when we organize? Not just against, and I'm very proud to have seen the conviction on all 3 counts, to really give George Floyd his due opportunity to rest in peace. I watched it with my children. And so I want people to know that this environmental fight that we're taking on is an opportunity. It's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for us to organize and to really change the narrative of our country and make it a better place for all of us.
Great. Team, I would really love, Daniel, would you be willing to take some questions?
Of course. Come on, you guys. You
Okay.
guys gonna make me y'all gonna make me take my tie off, man. Like I need you guys to have a good time. I mean, I'm here. I'm enjoying myself. I got my water. So look, ask away.
All right. All right.
I'm here to engage.
You are ready.
I'm ready.
Okie dokie. All right. All right. What I'm going to ask is if you got a question for Daniel, please put it in the chat. And by the way, your good buddy Juan Smith is in the house.
Juan
Now
is a
Juan is
rock star, man. I
hiding.
love Juan.
Her camera's off, her mic is off. I was gonna put Juan on and go, Juan, say hey. So I'm going to invite you anyway. Juan, say hey. Oh, she may have stepped away.
It's all good. I know how to reach Juan.
All right, all right. Come on, people. Questions from somebody other than me. People are always going, they never let me ask a question. Oh, Daniel, you're gonna like
Everybody's camera is off.
All right.
I see a
Dan-
question that
Dan-
says, how can we best help between now and the next election? How long do you have to wait until you can be elected? Well, I haven't decided if I'm going to run again. I was very, and that was from Elsa or Elise.
Elsa, yeah.
Elsa. Where's Elsa?
Yeah.
I don't see her. But anyway, oh, hey, Elsa, I see you. Here's the thing, I'm one of those folks that put my name on the ballot because I felt like in my heart it was just the right thing to do. I've been asked because obviously in 2022, Stacey Abrams' name is being put out there a lot in the state of Georgia, and I've been asked to run for multiple positions in the state of Georgia, but that's not me. I'm the kind of person that feels like I'm gonna run where I think I'm most needed. And so as of right now, I would have to wait another 6 years to run for this particular seat that I just ran for, which is a long time, and I get that. But the good thing for you to know is that I'm not going anywhere. Whether I'm a candidate or I'm just an advocate, I'm going to be doing a lot of work. We are recruiting to make sure that the Public Service Commission never has an uncontested race. But I haven't decided yet, but I'm very flattered for you to think of me in that capacity. So thank you. I appreciate it.
All right, great. Okay. There's the well, right. And then Elsa's next question is, all right, Daniel, what are you doing between now and then, and how do we help you?
Well, I'm actually getting ready to work on a climate documentary. You guys are hearing it here first. I can't go into it too much, but I am working on a documentary that highlights people of color. I think that too often we've seen a space where Black and brown communities have been portrayed as victims and climate refugees, but we're so much more than that. We're scientists, we're meteorologists, we're engineers, we are farmers. I want to show us in a different light. I think it's important for storytelling, especially as we enter into a space where, Black folks in America for so long have been portrayed by media in negative lights. And, when you see a young Black man like myself, I want to be able to tell the stories of folks that inspired me. And there's a quote that Frederick Douglass has. He said, either you raise strong children or you repair broken men, right? So like the way I look at life is either we can tell stories that can give people a fair start, or we can act as if the things we're seeing and experiencing don't exist, and we have to repair the damage that it causes down the line. So I'll put my website in the link. I'm very accessible. I am going to be doing some good things, but at the end of the day, I'm really going where, God leads me, and whatever doors open, I'm going to continue to go through them and support really great people. But as of now, there's no organization I'm going to start, or, no office I'm planning to run for right now. It's just really taking a break from a 13-month campaign and giving my family the time that they have sacrificed for me to have gotten to this point. So I'm going to take a couple of months off, but I'm not going to be gone very long.
All right. Well, Daniel, yes, we do want you to be able to sit down, breathe, build that energy back up so that when you get back out there and you're ready to work, well, number one, remember, we are out here going, what can we do to help? Um, so Daniel, we've got our main kind of activists, the heavy duty activist types are here tonight. So the numbers aren't really big, but we work with a lot of faith communities
I
at
love
the
it.
national level. And so these are the folks when we say, what can we do
I love it.
when we go back to our faith institutions and say, we've got an opportunity to really do work on climate. And what I am loving about the Religious Action Center on Reform Judaism, on United Church of Christ, Unitarian Universalist, is that in addition to their voting rights table and their social justice table, many of them are rolling out climate justice. This is something we are going to work on too, because at the end of the day, it's all justice. And we can carve a lot of pieces out of that pie. But at
Agreed.
the end of the day, is it right? Is it just? Yes or no?
Right. I see another question. It says, how can we get the role of the Georgia Public Service Commission some national attention? So many eyes were on the Warnock and Ossoff campaigns, but it seemed that national media wasn't mentioning it. So that's a very relevant question. There are two challenges to that. Number one, I was very fortunate to be running in a year where Donald Trump was on the ballot, right? And what I tell Democrats and organizers all the time is that his ideologies may not have gone away, but he will not be on the ballot in 2022 or in the foreseeable future. Knock on wood. But the reason why I share that is because we will no longer have the luxury to just focus on that type of challenge all the time, right? So what we have to do is going into the next several election years, the problem isn't just national media. The problem and the biggest challenge is getting voters educated to understand to go all the way down the ballot, right?
Right.
I got more votes on November 3rd than Reverend Warnock and every Democrat combined that ran for the US Senate, right? But yet and still, when it came to the runoff and folks had to go one vote down, I lost about 30 or 40,000 votes. Literally, folks had three races: US Senate, US Senate Public Service Commission. Almost 40,000 people did not go down one more button to vote for my race, and I lost by about 26,000 votes, which means if folks would have just gone down to the third person on the ballot, I would be a public service commissioner right now. Now, look, that being said, the way we respond to that is that Democrats, organizers, anyone that believes in democracy has to begin to educate folks about the importance of down ballot races. When you think of all the social justice things that we're dealing with right now, you look at Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. Well, look, Breonna Taylor, she never had her day in court because the attorney general in Kentucky decided that he wasn't going to try that case, right? We got to explain to people that traditionally don't vote for attorney general to understand that in the future, if you want someone to be prosecuted, you've got to go down beyond governor and lieutenant governor. You got to vote for attorney general because they deal with the courts. Labor commissioner, they deal with jobs. Public service commissioners, hey, these are the guys that can expand broadband and lower your utility bill. We have to do a better job of going to folks inside and outside of an election season, because the only way, to your question, that the national media responds is when you spend, $100 million with them, and let's just be honest. Georgia's 2 U.S. Senate races cost almost $1 billion, about $750 million in television ads. So the national media is going to respond because of an influx of cash. We raised $60,000 in the runoff. I had a very hard time fundraising because I was trying to raise money when everybody was pouring into the Ossoff Warnock campaign. And with $60,000, I got 2.4 million votes, right? And then going into the runoff, I raised $200,000 and we got 2.2 million votes. So my point is, the good news is that we can organize and win. The challenge is national media responds when there's a consistent flow of revenue that goes to them, because that maintains them keeping that story on national media networks and platforms.
One of the things that we did after the Georgia runoff was, when your legislature went in session and went into hyperdrive to suppress the vote, was we began informing voters. It's our own little form of voter education, of calling the voters we contacted who had voted by mail and who were in districts where their senators or representatives were the lead sponsors on these bad bills. And we basically told the voters, you know, we understand you were a voter that voted by mail. Did you know that your representative, your senator, is sponsoring a bill that will end no excuse absentee voting? So we do really, really, really agree and believe that we have to do a much better job in educating the public. We are working on figuring out how we can be that America's civics education that they never got. Because I'm 67 years old. When I went to grade school, they taught civics. My children, my oldest daughter is 40 now. Nobody taught her civics with me.
Okay. Yeah,
So
that's
people
interesting.
don't know where to push.
No, I agree. And Nancy, I see you raising your hand, but let me say this really quickly. I think that's one of the biggest gaps, because one of the questions in here speaks about, do you think that the Republicans did a better job of down ballot marketing than the Democrats? I don't think that was the case in my election. I think Democrats overwhelmingly did a better job of marketing. I think the challenge is the Democrats' focus in Georgia was on the 2 U.S. Senate races. So 80 or 90% of our effort was in getting 2 U.S. senators elected, right? What should have happened in Georgia, and I just want to be clear, I'm a firm supporter of the Democratic Party of Georgia, but the challenge is there was not a very strong coordinated effort. So while I had the full support of John Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, there were individuals that committed all of their time to Ossoff and Warnock and allowed me to, quote unquote, come along for the ride. What they didn't realize was that we were reaching folks in South Georgia that Biden, Ossoff, or Warnock would never reach, because most people that said, you know what, I'm not voting for Biden or Trump. You know what, I'm never going to see a U.S. senator, even though I vote for it, so who cares? They said, but my grandmother's lights got cut off last week, right? Those same people said, my kid is driving me crazy in the living room, but they don't have broadband to do their homework. And I literally had Republicans call me and they said, Daniel, I don't know you. I got a Donald Trump sign in my front yard, but Georgia Power has contaminated the creek I grew up in, and I'm going to vote for you. Can you come down and speak to my community? And I got calls like that from all over the state, from Tea Party Republicans that said, I don't agree with a lot of stuff about Democrats, but what I do know is the folks that's in power are getting paid off by the utility companies, and we need someone that's going to stand up for us. And so we did a great job in doing that. But at the higher levels, we've got to do a better job of not just focusing on one or two. The biggest mistake, and I can only speak for Democrats, the biggest mistake Democrats in Georgia can make in 2022 is to center the campaign around Stacey Abrams. Stacey is going to be a great candidate. If she decides to run, she'll have my full support. However, We've got to make sure we educate folks down the ballot races and the importance of electing folks that can help a governor to pass bills and legislation that can move the state forward rather than having one, Democratic dot in a sea of red. We got to do better than that. Nancy, I'm
Right.
sorry about that. I know you had a question.
Oh, no problem. I was just calling on Dr. Brenda Fairfax from North Carolina had a question in the chat. Brenda, do you want to unmute yourself and raise it? We missed it. If she's still here,
Oh, yeah, she's here. Brenda, unmute.
Hi, how are you?
Hey, it's good to hear you.
I'm not on the camera either because I'm not looking right. I just got off another Zoom session. But anyway, I'm curious, how do we educate people? Because most people do not do the research when they move into these communities. And I was looking at a place in Apex, North Carolina, and I discovered that there's a nuclear facility a few miles from there. So we cannot trust our leaders to tell us the truth about these communities. And when you go to when someone moves to a new state and they check out the schools and the businesses and all, it doesn't tell you about these things that's in the community. How can we educate people?
So I think that what we have to do first and foremost is we have to not neglect the fact that our children are the most educated generation in the history of this country. If we continue to depend on K through 12 education, which I personally believe the public school system over the last several decades has become obsolete because it's quite frankly teaching our children to assimilate rather than to be self-thinkers and to be active. I think civics needs to be taught more. I think financial education should be taught more. I think we have to change and rethink the way we're educating our children. It starts there. As a matter of fact, I've been a strong advocate for years of lowering the voting age to 16 because I think the earlier we can engage people in the political process, the more they will be intent to say, we want to be a part of that. I mean, imagine when you look at, and this is no disrespect to anyone on the call, but when you look at these marches and rallies around the country after Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, you saw mostly, 18 to 30-year-old Black, white, Latino, Asian, you name it, right? We saw young people out there marching and being activists, but you also saw during the March for Our Lives protests, right? After the insurmountable school shootings, you saw the 16-year-olds, the 15-year-olds, the under 18-year-old audience that was stepping up because they said, look, we're tired of our classmates dying. We're tired of our generation having more of an emphasis on death rates than graduation rates. So we've got to now rethink how we're engaging folks at a younger space, because the fear I have right now is that we're seeing so much polarization, so much tribalism within the political process that we're no longer teaching civics, we're teaching us versus them. So number one, folks like you that asked a question, you've got to continue to be on calls like this. People like Andrea and I, we got to do this more, right? Like, I ran for 13 months. Now that I'm not on the ballot, I got to check in once or twice a month. And, whether it's on a Zoom call or it's on a, an op-ed or, we got to figure it out. But people like myself have to readily be in contact and communication with you guys. But then the last part, all of us can learn one thing. We've been quarantined for over a year, okay? There's no excuse for us to become an expert in one thing and take that one thing and continue to spread it across our communities. In Georgia, the fight that we've recently seen has played out nationally is around voter suppression. So we've now got to educate people around voter suppression because many people don't understand how changing certain laws can affect voter turnout. We got to explain to people and educate the folks that when you have 32 precincts in in Atlanta, the city of Atlanta, Fulton County, and you cut that number from 32 to 8, you got to understand that targets communities and audiences that are struggling to be educated and to be in the process. We got to make sure, lastly, that, and this is something that we do a horrible job of, we're very good at engaging people in an election year, and we absolutely suck at engaging people when we're not on the ballot. We got to stop doing that. We got to talk to people when their lights get cut off in a non-election year, as much as we talk to them when their lights get cut off during a pandemic. We can't just go to people when we need their vote, because when a man or woman is hungry, or when a child is hungry and we're expecting them to perform well on standardized testing or whatever the case may be, we're taking for granted the fact that they're human, and human beings need to be mentally okay, spiritually okay, physically okay. We gotta be more concerned about each other so that we can educate each other and be more engaged, and not just come to each other when we have a need or a want. Sorry for the long answer.
Oh, Daniel, thank you. And that is basically the basis of these democracy centers that we are working on in 2021. They're in community, they're year round, they are there to help meet people where they are. If your point of pain is like in Richmond, my kids haven't been in school in a year. We live in the projects and I can't afford the internet. So now my kids, when they go back to school, are going to be way behind. All right. We opened an after school program in our democracy center because that was what our community needed. That was their big pain point. As parents are there, we can engage with the importance of voting. And we're also going to work on solving their internet problem. It may not be a permanent solution, but we'll be able to help. In Hawkinsville, Georgia, the Democracy Center there, every Friday, they distribute food. So when they went out knocking on doors for the runoff, they knocked on 2,100 doors and had 1,700 conversations.
Wow.
They said they would knock on the door and tell people where they were from, and they would call everybody. These are the folks from the Newberry Foundation, you know, where we go get food on Friday night.
Yeah.
And everybody
I'll tell you,
to listen to them.
You know, one of the most memorable stories I have from my campaign is a lady was driving to collect food. This was right probably about a month or two before the election, and she said, Mr. Blackman, you don't remember me, but you know, you put a box of food in my car, and I've lost my job, I'm not working. She said, but I wanted to give you $20, and that was hard. You know, I didn't want to take this lady's money, but she insisted. She said, you know, I want you to know that this is my first time having to ask for food. She said, this is my first time having to be in this situation. She said, but seeing you out here, because at the time, like this was one of the food giveaways, and like there was no media there. And she said to me, she said, you know, the first time I saw you, she said there were a bunch of cameras, and she said, I didn't know if you guys were doing it for notoriety, but she said, now you're out here and there's no one here to sing your praises. And she said, I want to give you $20 because I believe in what you're doing. And I think we gotta remember that we're in a pandemic. You know, like one of the things I do to this day is I ask, you know, people, even if I don't know them, I ask them if they're okay, right? Like we gotta be aware that many of us are mentally worn out, right? And self-care is so important. I know self-care and Earth Day right now, we're not, but I gotta say this, like self-care is so critical. There, like depression, anxiety, going through this pandemic. Some people have lost family members. Some people have, you know, literally had to fight to have everything they need. And I went to Albany, Georgia 6 times. And Albany, Georgia, I don't know what my voting numbers were overall. I know I did well, but I want to tell y'all this because Albany, Georgia at one point had the 4th highest number of COVID cases in the world. Okay. Albany, Georgia. And I went there so many times because there was so much poverty. And the first time I went there, I was getting gas and I gave a lady my flyer and she said to me, I don't want your flyer because you're not going to come back. And so that was the first time I had somebody look at me and say that. And I knew I was going to come back, but she didn't know that. And so I want y'all to know it's very important for us to be concerned about people, no matter what, you know, our issue of the day or our priority is, but to make it a point to be concerned about our neighbors and about our fellow brothers and sisters that are out there. So yeah, I went a little off script, but you know, hopefully that helps y'all.
Yeah, and that's great. Now we got a question from Richmond, Virginia. So let me deal with this question. All right. Green energy is going to be one of the largest transitions of wealth in our lifetime. We start a green energy company as a cooperative owned by and for communities of color. Thanks, Frank.
Did they say, how do we start it? Like, what was the?
Yeah. Frank said, how can we start the green energy company as a cooperative owned by and for communities of color?
Oh,
and I think that's continue this to another day.
No, I think that is like, I'm probably going to do a call on blockchain and social justice. I mean, like, let me tell y'all something. If you don't have young people that you're talking to, you're missing it. All this cryptocurrency and blockchain and like a lot of these tools that we're not thinking of can help us to strengthen the movement. And I believe in the co-op opportunities, organizing. I mean, the people on this call alone, you know, I don't want to go too far and suggest, you know, financial impact, but I said this earlier on a call. What Silicon Valley has done for the United States and the world in the last 20 years, the environmental and clean tech movement can do for the next 20 years. Like, I believe that the new Silicon Valley is environmental justice. And that's why you literally saw today Putin. Like, I don't agree with anything that Putin says. And for him to say that Russia is going to begin an aggressive plan to reduce emissions, for the president of China to come out, for all these individuals to start talking about it, what that does is it has an impact on financial markets. It has an impact on the World Health Organization. It has an impact on financial markets like Wall Street. And now that we're going to see an influx of cash, right? And I'm going to give you some numbers just to put this into perspective. Biden's plan is over $2.5 trillion, right? $650 billion of what Biden wants to propose in a couple of points. For instance, $213 billion is allocated to build and modernize affordable housing, right? $213 billion to modernize buildings and homes. I mean, that's a lot of money. We don't see that, right? 174 billion to accelerate production of electric vehicles, right? I mean, think about that. Where are the Black-owned companies that are doing battery storage? Where are the women-owned companies that are working right now in the EV market to expand these opportunities? $100 billion to increase power grid modernization. We all witnessed what just happened in Texas with a winter storm, right? What happens when they modernize these systems? $100 billion isn't a lot of money when you talk about 50 states, but $100 billion is a lot of money. So if my state,
right, it'll get you started.
It gets you started, right? So $100 billion for power grid modernization, 85 billion. This is the one that makes me excited. $85 billion allocated to increase and modernize public transit and expand it in areas that lack the ability to expand it, right? So we're not just talking about mass transit. We're talking about public transit expansion with clean vehicles, but then there's also 35 billion that is also allocated for research and for clean tech. The reason why I'm excited about this is because I'm a product of Clark Atlanta University, an historically Black college. I believe that when you start putting this money into it, Georgia, for example, we have a land grant college, Fort Valley State University, and we have two colleges on Georgia's coast that I'm very excited about, Georgia Southern, where my cousin goes, and Savannah State University. Why aren't we putting money into exploring offshore wind opportunities within the state? So I think co-op opportunities are extremely important because there's a lot of money on the table. And if we build coalitions and stakeholder groups, we can accelerate that. And we can also allow that to be funnels for our organizations that need more resources, especially during a pandemic.
And thank you, Daniel. And okay. I'm loving the little love signals. Time has flown. It is 9 o'clock. Daniel, thank you. I am going to put you together with Frank and some other co-op investor folks that I know. There are also a group of us who are connected to some of the federal agencies who are going, we've got all this money to give out and we don't know who to give it to. So we are getting involved in those discussions. So the historically Black colleges and universities, opportunities for wind energy. We're going to want to have all those things at our fingertips so that when we get in front of one of these people who goes, I don't know, I've got like $100 billion and I don't know who to give it to, we can say, we've got a plan that will do this. So Daniel, you need to be with us. You need to be one of the
And
people.
and
in
I
that
I want to offer something to your group. So I'm going to work with you offline, Andrea, and I'm going to set up a what I would like to do for anyone that's interested is you know, I usually consult, but I want to take this offline. And if anyone is interested, if you can send your email to Andrea, I would be willing to take a Saturday and to dive more in. And I would offer to everyone on this call, because I do consult, but I would offer everyone on this call that's serious about it at least 30 minutes of my time individually. Now, please be respectful of that time over a period, but between, let's say, May and June, if you're interested in speaking to me one-on-one, because I support you, Andrea, and the work that you're doing, I would be willing to at least take a couple of minutes out of my day on a Saturday between May and June to spend 20 to 30 minutes with anyone that finds value in that. Reach out to Andrea and we'll make that happen.
Daniel, thank you so very much. This has been as I said, I'm something of a fangirl, so it was really hard for me to sort of sit here and pretend that I'm being professional, but I think I was pretty good at it. Daniel, what a wonderful way to spend an evening. What a fun conversation. I love sharing the information. And again, your smile, the hopefulness that we will keep moving forward and we will win. We are on our way. Every little step back that we take helps us figure out how we can do 2 to 4 steps forward and leapfrog to get where we need to go. So Daniel, thank
Well,
you.
I want to leave everybody with this. There's two ways to look at this moment outside of the environment. I think everyone on here would agree that this is the only planet we have, right? No matter how many rovers are on Mars right now, we live on Earth. So we got to take care of our environment. But I want to say this to folks that witnessed both the insurrection on January 6th, as well as the verdict that was passed about 48 hours ago. There are two ways to look at darkness, right? Like the darkness of the womb and the darkness of the tomb, right? And I always give this example. One darkness represents an ending, the other represents a beginning, right? So I think that what I'm most optimistic about, that I would like to leave all of you with, is that this is a chance in our country to not close democracy and shut the door on everything that we've believed in, but it's an opportunity for us to have a new beginning. And I think that while the verdict that we just saw isn't victory, I think it's a very large leap in the right direction. I want you to remember how it felt to have gone from a place of accountability to a place where we can actually create something better for generations that have come after us. So thank you all for sharing your evening with me. Thank you for the opportunity, and thank you so much for the work you do wherever you are. I appreciate it.